Hi, my name is Becky Christofferson, Violin Guru, and today we're going to do the first video of the Violin Refresher course. We're going to do an overview of basic violin technique. If at any point during this video it is new or difficult for you, please press pause and practice what has just been presented several times before going on to the next thing. Feel free to use this video over and over again for as many days as it takes for you to feel comfortable and confident in your violin technique. So starting with your feet, make sure your feet are underneath your shoulders and slightly open in a V shape rather than parallel. Make sure your knees are loose so that you can rock back and forth and move. Make sure your hips are tucked under your shoulders. And you're standing tall and straight through the spine and your head. Perfect. Now for the bow, the easiest way to find a relaxed bow hold is to hold it in your left hand, shake out your right hand, and just plop it down over the frog. From that, add your pinky with your fingertip on top of the stick and your thumb underneath the stick. So if I lift my middle finger, you'll see that they make a circle. It's not going in to touch it, it's more passing in front of it like a window curtain. And you'll see that my thumb is tucked up against the stick, a little bit on the frog, but mostly on the stick itself. And my arm is relaxed, my elbow pointing at the floor rather than the side. So now let go with your left hand and you'll feel your pinky balancing the weight of the bow. If you let go, if it fell, that's fine. Just take it back with your left hand, shake out, plop it down, find your pinky and your thumb, and let go again. As you repeat this, you will build strength in your thumb and your pinky, and this will feel more comfortable. Notice that my middle fingers, I call them huggers, they go around the side and they really are hugging the bow. They're engaging the bow, but they're not squeezing. And my pointer finger is quite light. It does have a role once we start playing, but for just learning the bow hold, you want your pointer finger to be quite light. You can be able to tap it like this to know that it's not gripping the bow. For the violin, it's easiest if you hold it by the shoulder and put it up on your shoulder so that it's basically at a 90-degree angle with your body and that you can find the sweet spot on your shoulder where it balances. You'll want a shoulder rest of some kind. This is the Kuhn shoulder rest that I prefer. A sponge or any number of other shoulder rests are fine, whatever works for you. And if you have kind of forgotten about the left hand, you might find it helpful to put markers on your violin. Frets, if you will, since we don't have them. We'll take those off as you get more comfortable and confident. So once you have your violin balanced on your shoulder, you can add your hand, making sure that your thumb is placed behind your first finger and not holding the violin. You don't want your thumb pushing on the violin with your hand pushing back. You just want your thumb to be hanging out and you want your hand to be loose in front. Notice that my wrist is straight and my elbow is hanging naturally from my hand. So then just release and shake out and come back and add your thumb again. Check your wrist and your arm. Make sure that your fingers are curved and over the strings, not pointing up and not curling down. And shake out and add it one more time. If this is new or challenging, go ahead and hit pause and just do this about 10 times. Then for the fingers, we're going to do some finger bounces. We want the fingers to go down using our knuckles. You'll see that this knuckle here is bent as well as this one, and my hand is coming around to the violin. So my hand is actually turning towards me. So if we start with our first finger on the A string, and we drop it and release it, just like on a trampoline. You notice you can hear me. It's very strong, you won't break it, but I'm not pushing, I'm just dropping and releasing. You also want to make sure that you're using the thumb side corner of your finger, the one that makes a circle with your thumb, not the other side and not the flat, fleshy part of your finger. So we add the thumb and we bounce the first finger. Now you can switch to second finger. Make sure that your other fingers are relaxed, that you don't have any flagpoles with straight fingers. And then switch to third finger. And if you feel comfortable, go ahead and go for a fourth finger. But make sure your hand has turned and that your wrist is still straight and not collapsed. Notice if I let my wrist go forward, I'm actually taking my fingers away from the fingerboard. So I want to drive my hand up to the string and deliver the finger to the string, so to speak. Okay, so you can shake out, and you can try that on different strings. A is definitely the easiest. If you go over to the D string, you're going to want to bring your elbow with you. So the elbow looks like this on A, and this like D. And when you go to G, it's going to come even farther. And so is my wrist. If I'm going to do that fourth finger on the G string, I'm really bringing my wrist and my hand around. My thumb is still loose. It's pointing back towards the pegs, and it's kind of under the neck at this point in order to help me reach that 4 on G. If I do the more traditional approach like this, there's no way I can reach that 4 on G comfortably. Better to open up my hand and stay relaxed. And when you go to E, that challenge of staying on the thumb side corner becomes even more relevant. The habit on E is just to kind of go on the side like that, so you look like you're falling off the string. But what we want to do is from A, we want to go to the E string and keep exactly the same hand shape. Your elbow's going to come under a little bit farther rather than forward. So do that again. Shake out, add your thumb, and do your A string first finger bounces. Now keep your hand shape the same and go to the E string. You might want to do that for a while until it feels more comfortable. Then do the same thing with your second finger. So you're always using the A string as the model for the relationship between the finger and the string, because it's easier to do it well on the A string. It's more natural. Hop with your third finger to the E, and finally 4. Now these are all exercises that you can do as warm-ups even when you're practicing repertoire. It's a good idea to just practice a nice relaxed bow hold for a few times. Practice finding that sweet spot where the violin balances, and warm up with some finger bounces to build strength and finger independence in your approach to the instrument. Now to play, a lot of people start with long bows because it seems like playing long notes is easier than playing short notes. But the opposite is actually the truth. It's much easier to play with small bows and much easier to play shorter notes. It requires far less control. So what we're going to do is we're going to fly our bow to the E string. And you want to make sure that your bow is halfway between the bridge and the fingerboard, which puts it just about over the circles and the F holes. And you also want to make sure that your bow is in the middle, halfway between the frog and the tip. That's where it is easiest to make a good sound. So from this position, you'll see that my arm is just hanging towards the floor, very relaxed and natural. And we're just going to start with open strings. So you might want to relax and just put your hand on the violin shoulder for now. And I'm just going to play some short staccato notes. Staccato means that we're stopping the bow at the end and beginning of every note. So it sounds like this. Play that back to me. Good. So we only played 4 notes, right? My turn again. And play that back to me. Good. So make sure that you're really crunchy and crispy and stopping your bow. It's okay to even exaggerate right now, rather than connecting the bows. That's called legato, and we will do that much later. So let's do 4 more notes on the E string. My turn. Your turn. And float over to the A, letting your hand lead and letting your elbow follow. Same thing, my turn. Play that back. Make sure you're still stopping your bow. My turn. Your turn. Good. Now float over to the D. Notice that the elbow is always below the hand, but it's no longer pointing at the floor. It's rising with me with each string. So this was E, this is A, now I'm on the D string. My turn. Your turn. Good. Take a minute and check your pinky and your thumb and make sure your pointer is not pushing. Make sure your bow is still halfway between the bridge and the fingerboard, and that your bow is still in the middle between the frog and the tip. My turn. Your turn. Good. And of course now we're going to go to G. Take your hand all the way, bring your elbow. Your turn. Good. Check that bow hold. Make sure you're stopping. Your turn. Excellent. Now as we go back to D, your elbow leads and your hand follows. Your turn. Good. Now as we go back to A, again the elbow leads and your hand follows. Your turn. Good. And we drop to E and back to my relaxed position with my elbow near my body. Your turn. Perfect. So that is a great warm-up exercise to practice your string crossings and your staccato. Just 4 notes on each string. And then repeat the G. And as you do that, notice that the instrument is still resonant. Even though you're stopping the bow, you're not stopping the resonance like this. That's too staccato. You still want to make sure that you're letting the strings ring. So then the next step, of course, is to combine the fingers and the bow. So you can see I've put 2 markers on my violin. One is for my first finger, the other is for my third finger. The easiest hand position to start with is with your second finger touching the third. So you have a big gap between 1 and 2, and then your fingertips are touching between 2 and 3. And then fourth finger, if you're brave, You're going to bring it all the way around. Make sure that your fourth finger is just as curved as the other fingers. No stretching or reaching. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to fly to the E and land in the middle between the bridge and the fingerboard, and the middle between the frog and the tip. Check our pinkies and our thumb bumps and make sure that the pointer is not pressing. Make sure the elbow is relaxed. Now float over to the A string, and we're going to play 4 notes on A. Place the first finger, which then makes the note B. Place the second finger right next to the third finger marker, which makes the sound C sharp. The third finger, which makes the sound D. And the fourth finger, which makes the sound E. Lift the 4. Lift the 3. Lift the 1. Lift. So you might want to rewind and play that with me, or go ahead and hit pause and play it by yourself, being careful to bring your wrist around to that fourth finger. Don't leave it back here, and don't let it collapse underneath the neck. So when the A string feels comfortable, do the same thing that we did with finger bounces. Go over to the D, always starting from E because that's where you can be most relaxed. Float over to D, and our notes on the D string are open D. First finger is E. Second finger is F sharp. Third finger is G. Fourth finger is A, which is the same note as the open. And then play the 4. Lift it up. Lift 3. Lift 2. Lift 1. So as you practice these, of course, you're going to monitor your technique, your thumb and your pinky and your pointer, your elbow, your wrist, this elbow. And you also want to tell yourself those note names going forwards and backwards so that you really become familiar with them. We'll talk more about why it's F sharp instead of F and other things that we'll discover. We'll talk about that later when we tackle the note reading and some of the theory. But for now, it's fine to just learn that it's called F sharp. Then, when D string feels comfortable, start on the E, float over to the G. And on the G string, our notes are G. 1 is A. 2 is B. 3 is C. 4 is D. Which, yes, is the same as open D. And if you're very in tune and not touching the D string with your super curved fourth finger, you might notice that the D string is vibrating when you play your D on the G string. That's called a sympathetic vibration, and it's one of the first steps to being able to play in tune on the violin, is to be able to identify that. So after you've played 4, release it for 3. Release. 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 Good. Shake out. Now remember, the pitfall of the E string is that we might want to do this. So once again, orient your fingers over the A string so you remind yourself what that hand shape should look like. And then keep the same hand shape as you prepare to play the notes on the E string, which starts with open E, 1 is F sharp, 2 is G sharp, 3 is A, and 4 is B. So those are all the notes that we'll be using at first in the violin. We are in first position, which is the lowest position on the violin, and we are using this finger pattern with our 2 and our 3 touching and spaces between 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So I would practice that on all 4 strings until you feel comfortable that you can trust your fingers to go down in the right place most of the time, and you have good bow control. And if there are other pieces that you have learned previously that you'd like to get out and try, then this is a good time to do the easier ones. But just make sure that everything you play has a curved pinky and a thumb, a curved thumb up against the stick, that your pointer is not squeezing and pressing, that your elbow is relaxed, that your shoulder is on your violin, on your shoulder sweet spot, your violin is on your shoulder sweet spot, and your wrist is straight with a relaxed thumb. Those are the foundations of being able to bring your hand around to play in tune and to be able to make a beautiful tone. If you're playing other pieces, right now I would encourage you to focus on pieces that have faster notes, staccato if possible, rather than long legato bows, which do take a lot more control of the bow. The longer we pull it, the more the shape of the hand changes, the more dynamic it becomes. So we'll be talking about that a lot in future videos. My favorite easy song to practice, since I'm a Suzuki teacher, is Twinkle. So it starts on open A, E, F sharp on E, open E. Now 3 fingers on A, either 3 by itself or all 3 at once, whichever makes you feel more comfortable. Release, release, release. All 3. Release, release. All 3. Release, release. Release. Good. So you can rewind and learn that with me. Notice that even though it's not necessarily a staccato song, I am still using short bows, little bows. As a more advanced version, of course, it would be beautiful to play it legato. With bigger bows, but we're not going to start there. And after you've learned the notes to Twinkle, there are many rhythmic variations that you can do. The most famous Suzuki variation is this. Dr. Suzuki called it simply taka taka tak tak, syllables. You can reverse the rhythm, tak, tak, taka, taka. You can play our original rhythm of just the 4 short notes. all give you opportunities to hone your staccato skills. And the advantage to practicing the same song with different variations means that you don't have to constantly be learning new notes. You can just play the same notes so that you have more mental space available to monitor your technique and to work on the staccato and the different rhythms. So this concludes our first video. Please take your time. This is your foundation for everything else. So the more comfortable you are with this material, the easier everything else is going to be. I'll see you in the next video.